So, Adam, welcome to Rock's blog.
Thank you very much for having me.
You're welcome. And we're here to talk today about vulnerable.
Yes.
So, I know from reading a little bit on Film Freeway that this is a script and a film and a project that is very personal and very close to you. How was approaching something in a creative way that is so close to you?
Mm. Yeah, I think it's probably one of the most asked questions because of the nature of the fact that it's so close. Well, it's based on a true, effectively inspired by a true thing that happened to me when I was 10. Um, and I guess because of that, there's been advantages by the way of really being able to get into the nitty-gritty details and the nuances that you can only really have if you've gone through it. But also that, I guess that was a challenge because you're so close to the source material that you really have to step out sometimes and go, okay, yes, but what about that? You need to be able to step back and pick apart things, I suppose, without being biased because you've experienced it. Yeah, and that was pretty challenging to do.
Yeah.
Earnestness, I guess, but I really feel that I have, and yeah, heart and soul has definitely gone into it. Yeah,
And I think that shows it's an incredibly moving film, from all the sort of the different angles and your approach to such an incredibly difficult subject matter. So in the script writing, how were you able to remove yourself, as you said, and look at it objectively?
yeah. I guess it's kind of twofold, really, because in the writing process, as much as we did in the rehearsal process, actually, I had to step away. When I was engaged as a writer, I had to take away, put the writer's hat on and take off the actor's hat, or knowing that I'm producing it or directing it.
All the hats.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I have a whole wardrobe full of hats now. Uh, it's it, it's one of those things that I guess some of it came quite easily because it was sort of thoughts that I had maybe over the years had ticked over, even subconsciously, that I knew I wanted to address with the film. Some of the questions that I would put to the real Mr. Amble, so to speak. But at the same time, it's vitally important to be able to speak from a character like that, a very, one that society deems inherently evil, how to give him the words from what would be his truth, even if sometimes he's choosing to be deceptive. Um, uh, those sort of people were quite calculated. They would know what to say.
Mm.
Um, but at the same time, you have to consider things when he's actually saying something in truthfulness, which me as Adam, having gone through it maybe was quite hard to sort of think. Well, I don't like he would be saying some of these things to me, but the truth is, you have to be able to go and look at it from their point of view to be able to make a really truthful film uh, and allow people to effectively it's seeing it through someone's eyes like a character like that, but without condoning what they're doing. It's not justifying it. It's just saying, well, this is what they would think. Yeah, and writing that I found that was probably one of the biggest challenges actually,
Yeah,
having to put words in his mouth.
I can completely see that. And I mean, I hope you don't mind me saying, but there was a vulnerability to him as well,
Oh yeah, yeah.
which almost, that's why I said, I hope you don't mind me saying, because that feels wrong to say, but that really does come across.
Yeah, I mean, it's partly the reason why I landed at the word vulnerable for the film is because essentially everyone in it is everyone, all the main characters are in one way vulnerable. And the thing is, where with a character like Mr. Ramble, well, I suppose in reality, those people, when they're, I should say, active in their exploits, I suppose, they're usually 50 steps ahead. We worked with an expert child social worker, Laura McFall, who has an expertise in criminal justice settings, working with Scheduled One offenders, which Mr. Ramble was, um, specializing in working with children and vulnerable people. And she was saying, well, we really wanted to work with someone like that so that, we wanted to make a film that people couldn't say, well, they wouldn't say that, or he wouldn't say that, he would behave that way. Um, so he does. But the vulnerability is the fact that in this situation, the man can't be 50 steps ahead.
Mm.
So, he's presented with this, and in some way, he's maybe trying to take control of the situation. In other ways, George effectively has a confrontation with him and says how he's been made to feel, and by doing that, saying, well, you basically effectively may be complicit in your twisted fantasy. Not that that's said in the film, but what's interesting is you don't get a response that maybe might be expected from someone like that who's done time in prison to say, "Oh, how dare you! I've gone to prison and I've done this and I've paid for my time and I'm a different person." No, he reacts actually in a way. It's up to the viewer whether they think it's with truth or deception, but he appears quite hurt that the memories for George could seem anything other than real. That happiness wasn't real. So of course, yeah. So in a way, he's vulnerable because he could be genuinely upset that the heart behind his intentions, although evil, wasn't said with truth or done with feeling. So, and that's the thing, like you said, like you felt uncomfortable at his vulnerability is exactly what I wanted, because it's like, well, no, it's uncomfortable, but in order to move past any sort of like mob mentality, these people are monsters, whilst all that might be true, it makes for a much more interesting film, I think, to really explore that vulnerability, because it puts you as a viewer in position of, oh gosh, do I dare feel sympathy even? And that's in a way you're kind of being having a sense of that manipulation without even realizing it.
Yeah.
Or
No,
are you?
absolutely. And the moment where, the other young boy comes into the shop, and he obviously wants to have that conversation with him and engage with him. And then he finds himself having to snap, At one point I was like, oh, I feel sorry for him. And I was like, no, you don't. So it's a very sort of twisted way of putting it in a kind way. It's confusing, but in the best way.
Yeah, it's that ambiguity is deliberate. It's very well calculated, to bring you on this journey of like, well, the things that you felt when you seen them talk about the past together, and him, trying to uh, lead you as to why he may have felt or why he behaved the way he did. It's actually from feelings,
Mm.
um, rather than anything necessarily predatory, although it is clearly. It kind of guides you into thinking, oh, okay, you let your guard down a bit, and not your judgment, but like you say, that feeling of empathy. Um, so it is jarring when suddenly you feel like you've had a miscarriage of justice and treated like, you've been duped, because because there's some twists and you're not sure what's truth and what's deception, which is very much what it's like when you're going through something, not necessarily as a child because you're unsure when you're that young, but when you're an adult and you're trying to deal with the psychological effects of that, you teeter on this kind of like, well, anger at being effectively lied to and used, but at the same time, like this film sort of tries to give an experience of is, this guy is has made me sort of see it and try and understand from his point of view. But it's all part of trying to solve the problem that we have with these offenders is that if you can't move to understand the origin of the behavior, it's just going to grow and sadly happen more and more. And as we've seen, a lot is historic accounts of these happening from 20 odd, even longer, years ago, and it all coming forward now. Thank God, and that's why this film exists.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an incredible topic to explore, and also, as you said, to present to people and to present a different point of view and a different way of thinking about it. And sort of on that vein, how hard was it to find an actor to play Mr. Amble against you? Like, I was watching it going, how do you do that?
Yeah, I think Miles Gallant, who plays Mr. Amble, is phenomenal. I've known him for a really long time, actually. He's picked up a few Best Actor awards for this part. And one of the greatest things about Miles is that he effectively, whenever I've told him that, he's not believed that he's been nominated. So someone like that is sensitive, I think, to the nuances of the part, and when I was writing it, I knew it would be tricky to cast, but I kind of had Miles in mind just because I knew his capabilities, and I knew that he would have that approach to a part. He'd be quite carefully emotionally to it. Yeah, and actually, when I approached him, I did think, I was like, how do you? And I had this all the way through with lots of, with locations and other actors. Like, how do you, especially the parents of the children, how do you approach someone and say, hey, would you like to play uh, someone who's grooming children?
Yeah, it's not really the role that you look at and go, oh yeah, I'm suited to
I
that.
know. But funny enough, I think as actors, those kind of roles are the ones you want to get your teeth into because it's really trying to understand the psychology of someone like that is interesting. But yeah, so yeah, it was in a way it was kind of simpler, I guess, to find Miles because I knew his capabilities and I knew he liked good work. And he was really actually involved with workshopping Mr. Amble, like carving him out throughout the time I was writing. So I'd come up with some text and I put it to him and we'd improvise a bit and then we'd suddenly come up with moments that I was like, yes, that's kind of where I need this to go. Uh, and knowing that he would be playing it, I think it was great to sort of extract some of that from him.
Yeah. I think that's always phenomenal as well when you're able to work with actors along the process. Speak to a lot of filmmakers who maybe write pieces with certain actors in mind, and yeah, you can really see how that's shaped throughout. Were there lots of rehearsals for this? How did sort of the pre-production look?
Well, as I said, yeah, I've sort of touched a bit, but it was as I was nearing completion, I guess, of at least the first draft, that we'd already had moments where we were standing up and working out, how does proximity between the two characters affect not necessarily what you'd say, but the action that would suit that kind of moment, knowing we were playing opposite each other. So that was really interesting.
Maybe in your body language as well.
Yeah, I mean that again, that's kind of one of those tricky things for me because I'm sort of playing myself, but I'm not because I've given George key characteristics that I don't have,
Mm.
and the need to hear it from Mr. Amble himself is more present in George than it is for me.
Mm.
So, but there are a lot of times I found it very hard to sometimes we were up on its feet and actually when we did move into rehearsals it was like really talking to the real man, but that also builds to the authenticity of the piece, I think. But we rehearsed it very much as you would a play. We had a room at the very lucky to have a room at the Globe Theatre, just running up to pre-production by way of looking how to shoot it. We had the cinematographer, the sort of DOP in the room as well. We set the floor out like the proximity of the shop, and so were really building in the cinematography in with our rehearsals, and so that almost came like not another character, but it really helped kind of build the tension and when we could decide to come closer in and stuff like that. But yeah, I found it because we'd rehearsed it like a play. Um, it kind of I don't know, we sort of really felt out like where the tensions would be naturally.
Mm. Yeah, and we're able to play with those. Yeah, no, absolutely. And you've got some great angles and the way the conversation is played with sort of around the shop and everything, which, it shows to the rehearsal and the time that's put in. And then of course I have to mention the tone, the palette. It's all very light. It's the juxtaposition of a beautiful English countryside and these fabulous memories with the darkness of the subject matter. Why
I,
was that decision made?
I'm really glad you picked up on that actually because it was really that's something I was very keen on from the start because so we I chose to set it in that sort of rural English countryside setting because it kind of represents this kind of isolation from the real world, so to speak, and also the pressure they're on when George finally walks into this shop and boom, there's the man. Um, but also the shop itself is a community asset, which say the Laura, the children's social worker, was saying was like, these people are placed very strategically depending on their threat level back into society, and often their first employment isn't really employment; it's as a volunteer, as it's subtly dropped in the film.
Yeah.
So he's landed himself this position. But the thing is, I really wanted this kind of idyllic place so that the injustice of it all to George to see how Mr. Amber was living this comfortable life. The locals know him, and he seemed, is that the sort of life someone like that should be leading? But also because it's a working shop and they're on their own, it really the sense of jeopardy for Mr. Amble was high because anyone can walk in at any moment, and this guy here can spill the beans, and he's using a name which he used to go by, so he knows off the time, and he knows that I know he knows who I am. Yeah. But yeah, it's with the cinematography, it's all very the fluorescent kind of feeling of the ordinariness of the world versus the vibrancy of the past. It's very deliberate. It was super sunny, idyllic. I always feel like these things when you're looking back um, to like childhood or happiest times like that it's always sort of rose tinted. It's always at the golden hour, and so that I really wanted to reflect the contrast between the ordinariness, like I say, of the shop. So that was done all pretty much on static camera. It's very still, and the palette, like I say, is very everyday. Whereas the past was, yeah, like effectively golden, sort of rose tinted, vibrant, and also almost entirely shot on handheld, so that you had that movement. It just sort of blended the two modes a bit better to say that you know that that the handheld camera is reflective of the freeness and
Yeah.
fluidity of the past and childhood and playfulness, whereas where we really are in the shop right now is they're in a really serious situation, so that's it's still the cameras are yeah.
Yeah. And I think as well, handheld and it's that nostalgia, that emotion, which, like you said, is quite intangible. But yeah, we see the past as some kind of beautiful time sometimes, even when it wasn't. And it's the nature of memory, and that's hard to convey in film, but you do it very well.
That's one of the things I was most important to me, that I really wanted people watching to have a flavor of almost, yeah, like it's transposing from the screen to you. Like even if it's you're seeing something on screen that you can almost smell because you identify with it, and yeah, it's really trying to draw that out, like what childhood was like. I mean, even right down to the props or the clothing, even. And there's a shot, of a bedroom that, if you're as old as me, you know the sort of room that would be in a boy's room, I guess, or any kid's room.
I mean, I'm quite similar to your age, and we are not old.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, no, we're not. You're right. It's just a number. Yeah.
So, yeah, as well. So all of that mise en scène and the production design and everything, it's all really important, and it just adds to the integrity and the authenticity of the story you're telling.
I think lots of people that I spoke to are quite surprised um, how you're drawn into the past, and how so I think it was Lou Ferrigno Jr. actually, who we were very lucky to have him as he was a judge at one of the festivals, and he said some lovely kind things, but he actually said that he didn't expect to be taken on such a wide journey in the way we've done it. It felt quite different and unique, which is, I guess, what is quite different about this film, the way it does it, because it flicks between past and present, but somehow it feels as if you haven't gone back at all. Like it's just you just always was. Um, so it's being recognised. I mean, the music actually is part of the responsibility of that, because it's original music written to picture by Trevor Wensley, and everything about it is just enhances this kind of like childhood kind of whimsical sunny afternoon, um, but it kind of gently escorts you into it. I think
Yeah.
it's all part of the feeling, as well as the unease, because there's the odd off note when things get a bit sort of like, oh, hang on, that you've said something a bit odd there, but
Yeah.
it's subtle.
Yeah. No, 100%. And I think that there's a line in there, and we kind of touched on this earlier when Miss Amble's like, well, how could you not fall in love with that 10-year-old boy? And you're sort of watching that and you're going, oh no. But then
Uh,
at the same time, we're still, and and that I think there's a difference in the music changes something. There's just something that makes your heart go, ooh.
yeah, that moment is it's funny. I wrote the whole thing, more or less the whole thing, as a lot of people do, in the foyer of the Littleton Theatre in the National, just on my laptop. And I do have a memory of really early on writing that line, and it's stuck all the way through. Because that, again, it's a great example of one of those things that you have to think about what someone like that really might say to you. And if the truth of it all is, I mean, so just to jolt sideways slightly, the social worker Laura, she was saying that, effectively, or part of the conversations we had from her, this came out of it. Like there's two types of offenders like this. They're either predatory, which is everything you can imagine about what that is. They're doing it to harm, and they may be, yeah, to exploitative and whatever, in a predatory way. Or there's the other sort that, whilst they are also predatory, they feel as if um, they've fallen in love with just they see it as a young soul, like you and I could fall in love. But I mean, they're aware that it's not accepted, of course. But what they're trying to say is it's part of their fabric, and they can't. That's how they see it. Um, and those ones are more, I think, probably more likely to, if they're understood earlier, to get help sooner. Um, but sadly, that's not necessarily the case, and then it evolves into a situation like this in the film. But so that line, which is "How could I not fall in love with the boy so sweet," um, is a really key one because it sounds quite truthful, although if someone like that had to try and express how it felt to them at the time, it, it's as uncomfortable as it is to feel that that could be truth. You have to move past that and say, well, this person would say this. This is one of their reasons, you know. And you're in amongst all this lovely poetic way that both characters talking about the past, and it's kind of the final kind of like, look, this isn't it doesn't excuse my past behavior, but all of the things I've been talking about, I fell in love.
Yeah.
Um, and it's uncomfortable because it's at a point where, yeah, it it's yeah going deeper now and into a place in the memories, which is there's a stillness at that point, and it's both unsettling and calm, but kind of at the same time. But I say you're meant to feel like you're in kind of
Yeah.
limbo-ish.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I'm glad that you felt something from that line because
I almost had it.
yeah,
But no, it's that tension that carries throughout, and it's why we feel conflicted, that we feel a bit of empathy for him, that we don't understand, and you balance that, and it carries throughout the film, which is commendable as well, because it could be quite easy to then snap to something more judgmental and maybe shift in tone. But right until the end, and sort of sat there watching it, going, I just don't know what I feel in the best way.
yeah, it's yeah. Well, I'm certainly glad that you got that because it is this kind of I don't think I didn't want to make a film that just tied it all up in a nice neat bow and
There
made you
is no Nebo, is there?
know. Well, it's like in life, that's the thing. Like I want people to sit there in reflection in credits, which is just says delicate bird song, and I've heard that it's palpable in cinemas where I've been in at festivals. People are digesting what they've just seen, and then when they talk to other people, it's with a real sense of, oh, I've just been through something here,
Yeah.
and yeah, it's not cliched, and it's not necessarily what people expect from given the context of the subject matter. So, but that's what I wanted to do. I wanted
Part
to,
of filmmaking, it's part of introducing audiences to new things.
yeah.
Yeah, and I mean on that vein, so I know we mentioned earlier you've been going around, you've been doing the festival circuits. What feedback have you had? How have you seen people's reactions? What's it been like watching it with an audience?
Well, I remember we did a sort of private industry friends, family, cast, crew screening. Very luckily to have the Barbican.
Okay, nice.
Yeah, yeah, it was really lovely actually, and that was the first time that even the cast and crew had seen it. So that was a sort of band-aid moment. But right from then, people were happy, people were sad, they were moved, they were reflective, trying to see where on the spectrum that the film, I guess, presents where their childhood sits on it. And oddly, I think the thing I've been most asked is if I found it cathartic, and also a lot of people say that I'm brave, um, which is something very hard to kind of take on and go, yeah, that was brave actually. It's taken a really long time, but the more people that speak to me, the more I think, oh, um, there's a lot to be unpacked in this film, and I've sort of found that by doing the film that I didn't realize that I would find it as cathartic as I had. And maybe I hadn't dealt with it as much as I thought I had, but now I have because of this film. But what's sad and sort of joyous in equal measure is I've been with this film uh, to a lot of film festivals. Very been graced with that. It's been so lovely to be accepted, not least because it's so personal, and I take it really to heart that whenever there is a selection. Um, but I've been to several countries with it, and obviously in those countries there are international film festivals, so you get people from other parts of the world also there, and that the sad part is this story is relatable across the planet, um, which is hard actually to sort of think that's the case. But at the same time, I'm really glad the film exists and is there for people to open up this conversation, because that's what I really want to do is that, and it exists for all the people who have gone through this or know someone's gone through this or suspect someone's going through it, to be able to try and excavate that. So the conversation I've had have been really encouraging and thankful, and there's me. I'm thinking, wow, I'm thankful for you to be interested in the film, and that you've giving us time to watch it. A lot of people felt comfortable enough because they know it's based on my own story to open up and talk about their experiences, which has been great. I mean, a few people I know have actually moved to work on something that was sort of underlining we didn't realize even, which is good.
It's
Yeah.
amazing.
So
It is. It's really amazing. That is the power of film and, the
mm,
power of creativity. And, what do they say? There's the old thing in Hollywood, there are five stories or something, and we're all just telling them slightly differently in a different way. And so it's so refreshing when you come upon a story like this, which is, it's something that I haven't seen before. This side, this representation of the conversation. And that's always refreshing. And yeah, I can completely see how it resonates with audiences.
yeah, well, it's one of the magic things of film festivals. If you can, when you attend, you can talk to people directly
Yeah.
about their films and their life experiences, and learn actually and change your perspective occasionally. And going around, with such a personal film, you get that in return. So yeah, you're absolutely right. Magic of film, I've been astounded at the level of creativity and vulnerability, actually, given the name of this film. But like, people are vulnerable when they make films about
Yes.
anything really, but not least when it's. I guess people make films about things they're interested in or have some kind of contact in their lives with it, I guess, or a want to explore.
Hmm.
So more often than not, you are talking to someone who can teach you a thing or two, right? Yeah, and I mean, this film, Brighton Rocks, it's so close to where I'm from, and this is based on something which happened when I was, around Portsmouth, so yeah, I don't know, maybe who knows, maybe people will recognize, maybe not recognize it, but
Universality in the
yeah,
story.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. Well, Adam, look, thank you so much.
No, thank you. It's been a pleasure. I've really enjoyed talking about it. Actually, it's been really
Good.
nice. Yeah,
Good. I mean, it shines through, when you're speaking to somebody. Obviously, all filmmakers have got a huge passion for their work, but especially, you wrote, you directed this, you acted in it, and it's your story, and that's, yeah, again, bravo.